there's a different mindset, there's a different skill to go from a high-level producer to someone who manages people. That's a whole different skill set, to actually leading and inspiring. Right? In studying corporate America, the Fortune 500 companies, Jim Collins did a study and he found there's an anomaly amongst companies that, the book is called Good to Great. There's an anomaly amongst companies who are really dominating their field, right? What's an example of that? Is it the mobile phone industry an example of that? How many of you in this room have an Apple phone? Just raise your hand. So about 65% of the room. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have Android, okay? So about 40% of the room, 35, 40% of the room. Now, how many manufacturers manufacture the Apple phone?
One.
How many manufacturers would you guess manufacture the Android phone? 1,300. So 1,300 companies share a market share of 35 to 40%, while Apple enjoys a market share of 65%. Wow. It might be useful to understand how do they garner such extraordinary, exquisite market share. Here's another example. If I were to suddenly up here get Weeby, which has happened before, and somebody were to hand me a, is that what it's called?
No.
What's it called?
Tissue.
Facial tissue is the technical name for it. But we call it Kleenex. Boy, doesn't Kleenex enjoy great market share, yeah? So it's useful to study, like, what is it that takes companies from being ordinary to being extraordinary? And what they found in studying what was over 1,300 companies, over 1,400 companies, what they found is only 11 companies transcended to what's called greatness. In order to qualify for that phrase, greatness, right? Like the Apple versus the Android. Here's what they had to have. Great performance was defined as a cumulative total stock return of at least 3 times, that's what percentage? 300% greater than the general market for a period from the transition point for 15 years. So Jim Collins and his team spent over 50,000 cumulative hours poring over the 1,435 companies in a time period that had at one point made the Fortune 500 list. And here's the things that they found. There's 5 levels of leadership. However, the companies that went from being a good company to being extraordinary, now stay with me, let me ask you this. Put your hand in the air if you got into the real estate business in order to be average. How many of you got into the real estate business with the hope of being a little better than average? Go ahead and raise your hand. How many of you got into the real estate business because you want to be better than everybody else? Look, that's why you're here, right? We have a passion and a mission to deliver a better experience to the consumer than anybody else. So, although we're talking about leadership, and although, like Cambria and I will be focusing the majority of our effort with our mentors in helping them facilitate greater leadership skills, because look, it's a different skill set. All of the people that are on that list only qualified if they were top producers. There's a different mindset, there's a different skill to go from a high-level producer to someone who manages people. That's a whole different skill set, to actually leading and inspiring. And so it would be useful. By the way, do they teach this in high school? Are you taught that in college? Very, very little. This is the kind of stuff that you've got to go out and get at a really high level. Cambria and I have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in going out and getting this kind of training ourselves, because it's not just something that's just available. You follow? There's not a textbook that you can read in order to highly tune your effective leadership skills. It just doesn't exist.